welcome to episode 16 of Roll, Play, Grow, the podcast for tabletop entrepreneurs, creators, and fans. I am Courtney Stover of Lightheart Adventures, and in this podcast, we talk to the creators behind the brands and the tabletop role-play gaming space about who they are and how they are turning their passion for gaming into a career. Our next guest is Connie Chang, the game master and executive producer of Transplanar RPG. If you are not familiar with Transplanar RPG, it is a weekly actual play that is streamed on Twitch. They are an all-trans, POC-led campaign in a non-colonial and anti-orientalist world. Their debut stream was last June, and they've completed 2 arcs and recently started their 3rd arc. Connie's journey to getting the stream started was pretty strategic and very cool, and I enjoyed getting to learn about the show's origin story, Connie's campaign development process, and all about the work that goes on behind the screen to make an actual play production occur. We also chatted about Connie's upcoming game, Godkiller RPG, and learned a bit about their development process. As always, I've got a few items of business to go over before we jump into the interview. I mentioned this in the past couple of episodes, but we have a whole bunch of map packs over on DM's Guild. Our most recent publication is an all-color map pack for Candlekeep Mysteries that highlights sections of the book that didn't come with their own maps. And then we also have a black and white map pack for Rime of the Frostmaiden, specifically for Ythryn. I'll be honest, I never know that I'm saying that name correctly, but that's just what I'm going with. That pack, though, is inching towards a silver medal, and so we are pretty excited about that. You can find all of our map packs by either going to dmsguild.com and searching for Lightheart Adventures as the author, or you can go to lightheartadventures.com/shop to find all of our DM's Guild and DrivethruRPG publications in one spot. Next, we do have a Patreon for Lightheart Adventures and Roleplay Grow. You can find it by going to patreon.com/lightheartadventures. You have options on whether you would like to follow the adventure track, which will get you maps and adventures, or the merchant track, which gets you some fun bonuses around this podcast, like contributing questions to upcoming guests, a project spotlight on the show, and more. You can also support the show by subscribing, sharing with your friends, and leaving a review. We've still only got 1 review out there that I've seen, and it's on Apple Podcasts, but I would love to get some feedback and see if you're enjoying the show, what kind of guests you'd like me to bring on, and anything else that you would like for me to know. The affiliate that I am highlighting today is Found Familiar Coffee. If you like delicious coffee and gorgeous tabletop-themed artwork and supporting the artists and small companies providing all of that, then I highly recommend Found Familiar. My personal favorite flavors are Inspiration and Faced Up, but you really can't go wrong with any of the flavors you pick up. And I say that as someone that has tried all of them except for the decaf, because I just don't drink decaf. But anyways, if you go to foundfamiliar.com/lightheartadventures and enter in code LightheartADV, you'll receive 10% off your order and help support this show. That does it for our intro today, so I hope you enjoy this conversation with Connie. I am very happy to now introduce you to Connie, the game master and executive producer behind Transplanar RPG. Hello, Connie. How are you today?
Hey, Courtney. I'm not bad. Doing pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm really excited that you're hanging out with me and that I get to talk to you.
Yeah, this is really exciting. It's been several weeks in the making. Glad we can sit down and finally get to talk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to kick us off, can you tell us a bit about who you are and how you got into gaming?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Courtney so graciously introduced, I am Connie. My pronouns are they, he, and she. You might know me as the GM and executive producer behind Transplanar RPG, which is an all-transgender, people of color-led, 100% homebrew, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition live-streamed actual play campaign set in a non-colonial, anti-orientalist world. We stream on Twitch at 3 p.m. Saturdays. That's U.S. Central Time. And my journey to get here from being like a casual D&D fan, I think, oh boy, probably begins somewhere in like New Year's Eve of like 2016, I want to say. maybe 2015, 2016, because it was right after I'd graduated high school around that time. And I was looking to get into things that would, I think, challenge and excite me creatively. But, as a person who graduated, in screenwriting, I wanted something a little bit more collaborative, I think, than sitting in a room writing a script by myself. And I learned about tabletop games in general through D&D. And I learned about D&D through, I think, will resonate with a lot of folks, the McElroy brothers and their Adventure Zone podcast. My friends were listening to it, so I was like, what the heck is this? I'll check it out. I gave it a listen, and I was like, holy cow, I love this. I had no idea this is what D&D was at all. This sounds exactly like the stuff I'm interested in, so I started several home games, and yeah, I started scratching an itch I didn't even know was there. But that is how I first started getting into tabletop games.
I love that so much. And also, you studied screenwriting in high school? Is that?
Oh, no. In college, undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gosh. I got that confused. I was like, hold up, that school sounds amazing.
Yeah. I knew I had a couple friends in college who'd went to like special like arts high schools, right? And they like had like a focus on like filmmaking or like directing or whatever. And I'm like, wow, like our experiences are not the same. Like I would have killed for that. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, that would have been a whole different lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. So when you first started playing, did you just start being the game master right out the bat? Did you get to play characters first? How did that go?
I was 100% a game master right out the gate. First of all, because it just sounded more appealing to me, I think, than being a player. I was like reading through like the player's like handbook and like reading through like the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, all 3 texts a friend had lent me. That's how I first got my elbows in there deep. And I was just like, wow, like the GM gets to do everything. Like they get to plan the world, they get to populate it with NPCs, they come up with the hooks, they come up with the monsters, the conflict. Like, why wouldn't I want to be the GM? So I planned my first campaigns, and after running them for like a couple of sessions, I was like, I see, it's a lot of work. That's why people prefer to play. So I've had the good luck and fortune to be able to play after being a forever GM for a little bit. But I gotta be honest with you, Courtney, I much prefer GMing over playing.
Yeah, I just recently got into GMing my first full-on campaign. I had done one-shots here and there, but not a full campaign because I was like, oh, it's too much work. But yeah, no, I love it. It's so much fun. And I have plans for like a year from now that one day will happen. So do you homebrew everything that you are GMing, or do you ever go with like some pre-made supplements?
Pretty much it's 100% homebrew. Every single game I've run, every single game I've played in too, actually. The one exception, I guess, is I used someone else's adventure module to run sort of like a session 1 of like a pre-Transplanar RPG like session, just so my the players I'd recruited for the stream could get to know each other before we actually started streaming. And I was like, I don't want to do prep for that, so I just I bought someone's adventure module on DrivethruRPG and ran it. But even running that module, I homebrewed a lot of like the NPCs and like the hooks and like what ended up happening in it as well.
Okay. I realize that this next question could open a whole can of worms that could absolutely take the entirety of this podcast. So at a higher level, what is kind of your process for planning out, like whether it's for Transplanar or for something on a like more personal, intimate scale that isn't streamed? Like, what's your process for planning what your campaign story is going to be?
That is a great question. It depends on whether it is a persistent campaign with a limited number of sessions, or a one-shot, because my prep differs drastically depending on the expectations of the campaign itself. I find myself in the good fortune to also be a GM with Magpie Games' curated play program, which is basically like paid tabletop sessions using their games, including Masks, A New Generation, Urban Shadows, 2E, Root, the RPG, Bluebeard's Bride, a bunch of really fun games, honestly, that everyone should check out if they have the time and the money. But GMing through Masks, my prep is very different than GMing for Transplanar, because I started off GMing Masks one-shots, and then I sort of like graduated to GMing like 4-shots, which are sort of their like the longest campaign sessions that I've been able to GM through Magpie. And Honestly, there's more prep for me when it's a one shot or if it's just like a contained 4-session campaign, because you kind of, for me at least, have to hit like dramatic and emotional beats like every session. So you know, for it to feel satisfying, right? For it to feel like there's a beginning, middle, and end. Whereas for a persistent campaign with no real like solidified end date, things can be a little bit more flexible. I of course find myself prepping for each session, like session to session. But in terms of the broad arc of the campaign, I allow myself to have some flexibility within that. It's actually really fun that you ask this because I and the rest of my cast recently came up with a fun like narrative arrangement where after we're on our third arc now, we just finished by the time of this recording anyway, arc 3 episode 1 last week, and we're gearing up for arc 3 episode 2 last week, and we're gearing up for arc 3 episode 3. And the past 2 arcs have both taken like 15 or 16 episodes to get through, along with an arc interlude to bridge the arcs, usually like a travel monologue with that, or something that we invite a guest star on. But taking lessons from the first 2 previous arcs, I approached my players being like, would it be helpful for y'all? Because I know it'd be really helpful for me to have like an outline of the arc. Not like you know what's going to happen, right? But like these are like the general beats that y'all can expect. So we can all work together to get there pacing wise. And also like, if like folks had feedback for like stars or wishes that they wanted to have later on in the arc, I could easily incorporate them when planning out the entire arc structure at the end of arc 2, beginning of arc 3. And as a screenwriter, I actually find that my approach to story from screenwriting lends itself very well to how I prep each arc. Because for each arc, I divide it into 3 acts. An act 1, act 2, split into 2 halves by a midpoint, and then an act 3, which really helps me like group each act under like a certain amount of episodes with some flexibility. Like it's fine if like I planned out 4 episodes for arc 1, but it ended up being like 5 or 6. Like that's okay. I give myself the flexibility to do that. But this helps make Transplanar RPG feel, I think, cinematic and like tight and like very narratively and roleplay focused, which are things that I all try to all of us are very excited to push because we are performing for an audience instead of just sort of like playing a home game for fun.
I love that so much. I'm kind of curious if you're able to get maybe like an example of what would be on that outline that helps them get an idea and help like keep the whole, you know, arc organized without having spoilers for them. Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah. Absolutely. That is a really great question because it is a fine balance. And I don't think this would work for every table. Because I know some players like hearing this interview might be like, what? That's just, that doesn't sound like TTRPGs at all if you know what's going to happen. And it's less so they know what's going to happen and more so they're familiar with the kind of emotional beats they can expect. For example, I'm literally scrolling through the Discord channel that I posted this outline in so I can like find specific things for you. Let's see. So I start this process by asking folks for their stars and wishes from the previous arc. Right. So they're like, these are things I really, really liked from the previous arc. And these are things I really want to happen for arc 3. And I use those as seeds for planning arc 3, because the way I prep things as a GM is completely player focused. Like if my blood hunter Aasimar wants their obligations from their backstory to come to bear, I will make those obligations come to bear. Like if my warlock fighter really wants to travel, take like a session or 2 to split from the party and travel like to the beach, and like encounter a place from her past, I will absolutely let that happen. So an example here is the outline I had for them is like episodes 1 to 4. Like you're gonna meet this NPC at the very beginning of the arc that you all knew was going to happen anyway. That's why you're traveling to this new place. So that's not a spoiler at all. Everyone knew this was going to occur. And then I was very vague. I was like, you're going to learn about some drama, right, happening in this area of the world, this area that we call the Championship of Nabal, which is one of 8 major powers in our homebrew world of Endake, right? And then I'm like, all right. And then we're going to have some solo focused like sessions, with each PC doing their own thing, because all of my PCs, my players had expressed interest in splitting off and like doing individual quests for a little bit at the beginning of the arc. So I was like, great, you're make my job very easy because I know exactly what to plan for each of you. And then by the end of like the first 4 episodes, y'all are going to come back together to investigate the drama that you learned about at the very beginning of the arc. And then the next 4 episodes, right, like episodes like 5 to 8-ish, it's going to be them investigating the drama. What is the drama? We don't know yet. You'll learn more as you find out. And someone else, a different player, had an idea. I don't want to spoil things, but they had an idea for how things could come to a head at the midpoint, so I included that as well. And then episodes like 9 to 12-ish, we were like, all right, we're going to deal with the fallout for that, like from that. And the final 4 episodes, I don't think this is much of a spoiler at all. It's going to be like a big boss encounter, right, that we've been building up to the entire arc. We've had a big boss encounter at the end of every arc up until now, so I don't think it's a spoiler for our audience or for my players to tell them that. So like based on this trajectory, like you can tell like it's pretty dang vague. Like what I say, like this is pretty vague, but players still have a chance to be like, all right, I can expect to prepare for individual journeys for like the first like quarter, right? And then like the middle chunk, like all of Act 2, right? Like episodes like 5 to 12, we're going to be together. We're going to be facing this challenge. Something big's going to happen in the middle, like at episode like 8 or 9 or something, and then we're going to deal with the fallout of the big thing happening in the middle, and then everything's going to spiral toward a big boss encounter at the end. And just generally speaking, that's how I like to organize all of my campaigns, just like as a general rule of thumb, because I feel like that provides a very satisfying narrative arc that a lot of role play and fiction-driven players are interested in. The idea of like a nice beginning where you like just poke around, and then like the tension rises, something big happens in the middle, everything is spiraled towards its conclusion. We have a big explosive battle at the end, right? Because honestly, like D&D is a war game, right? Like all the funnest features and traits like revolve around what you can do in combat. So I try to feed that desire of my players by giving them a big set piece battle at the end of each arc.
That is amazing, honestly.
Thank you.
Like, first off, that is just a really solid outline. But yeah, like how did they respond once you had that all together and worked that out with them?
Yeah, there was a lot of enthusiasm from each of my players. One of my players is also my partner. So they are in the unique position of me like waking up in like a midnight sweat being like, I had this idea for the campaign. What do you think? And they'll be like, that's dumb as hell. Or they'll be like, you're a goddamn genius. And there's no middle ground, right? But the rest of my players like have also received it very well. I think it's helpful for them from like a pacing standpoint, right? They're like, all right, if they're like, okay, it's episode 5 and we're still on our individual quests, like it's probably time for us to like wrap things up in our corners of the world and start like coming back together, right? So it's not all me like pulling or pushing them along, and it feels like they, they're a part of the discussion as well, because they are like, these are things they brought up during their stars and wishes, and I just incorporated what they wanted into this arc design. One of my players in particular very much appreciates having a roadmap because they don't deal very well, I think, with like uncertainty, or they get very stressed out when I just sort of tell them, when I just ask, like, what do you do? Or like, what is your character's plan? And they don't have anything that can like help inform that decision, right? So at least now they have some sort of skeleton or structure they can like lean or fall back on when they feel confused about what their character would do in a given situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go back a little bit in time, though, and ask, like, how did y'all come together to do Transplanar? Like, how did you guys meet? How did this idea come together that you wanted to do this show and that you wanted to stream it?
Yeah, that is a great question. So it's Transplanar RPG. It's basically my idea. After graduating college in, oh my God, like 2019, I guess at this point, time flies. I was like, you know what? I want to start a podcast, a D&D actual play podcast, because at the time, Transplanar started out as a podcast, even though we are now a live stream. And, the first hurdle I had to surmount was finding players for the podcast, right? Like I was like, I want a GM, so I'll take that out of the equation. Like I want a GM. I'm cool with producing. I'm cool with being the person editing it together, but I need to find a cast. So I put out basically like a soft casting call. We're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, to like the local like queer exchange Facebook group, basically offering to GM and asking for players. And so many people like signed up because they're like, oh, I don't have to GM and we get to play D&D. Hell yeah, sign me up. I basically offered to GM a series of one shots for anyone who is interested. So So I got a lot of response from that. And this is all pre-COVID, by the way. So I met up with like folks from that original, like, I never said it was a casting call really, like during the post. I added like at the end being like, and I'd be interested in inviting players, you know, like from these like one shots if you're interested to like maybe participate in a podcast. But that was the extent of it. So folks signing up knew that I was looking for players in a podcast, but like there was no pressure, right? Like in the one shots to perform for me or like audition or anything like that. It was just sort of like, let's touch and go. Let's like see how this feels. Let's see if we jive or not. So I GM'd several one-shots from that, and that was how I met Max and Devin, who are both now players in Transplanar RPG. I really liked their vibe. Like, I really liked, you know, the kinds of like characters they were bringing to the table and the kinds of choices they were making. And like both of them had like expressed that they were interested and okay with like being invited to maybe come on to a podcast with me. And the other two players that I ended up inviting, one of them, of course, was my partner, because I can't not invite my partner, and they're an amazing artist and dancer, theater maker. And I was like, I absolutely need them on Transplanar RPG. And the other person, Erica, I knew her through my partner, C. I knew her through C and Erica's theater company that they were both on at the time, Open Flame Theater, which is like a queer and trans, like, I would describe it as like apocalyptic, like Dante-esque, like hellfire chic, site-specific outdoors, like opera, like queer opera is like what they do. So I found Erica through that. And we had a fifth player at the time, but she ended up having to drop out before our premiere because of like schedule-related reasons, which is totally fine. All of our love to her. So we ended up having 5 players to begin with, but now 4 for the actual stream. And we decided to change it from a podcast to a stream because we recorded a first podcast episode with basically the same premise as what our stream's beginning ended up being, the hook of the entire campaign, which is the stars and the gods vanishing, right? And like weird new monsters spawning in the strange dark. Like that's the hook of our campaign. We recorded a podcast episode, and I was the person responsible for editing it together. And Courtney, I got to give you props. It's hard as hell. And I was like, absolutely the hell not. I'm not going to be juggling like 6 different audio tracks and background music and Foley work, you know, and like a mid-roll and like an intro and outro. Like, hell no. I was like, I'm not doing this crap. So I pitched the idea that we could stream it instead, right? That'd be less like post-production work for me. And we were excited about the idea of going on Twitch. So we started streaming. COVID hit, I think because COVID hit like March, right, of last year.
Yeah.
It was like the lockdown happened, right? And our first episode came out like late June. So after COVID hit, we were like, this feels serendipitous. We can't see each other anyway to get together to record a podcast. So streaming from our own separate homes like actually works very well. And that's how we got together in terms of like a play-by-play like timeline situation.
Okay. So what steps did you take to get ready for that first episode once you did decide to do the more visual element?
That is another wonderful question. And the answer is, I'd mentioned earlier in the interview about like taking someone else's adventure that I bought through DrivethruRPG and running it. And that was one of the steps we took right before our actual like session 1 that was streamed, like our pilot episode. Because the four of them, C, Devin, Max, and Erica had never actually played together. C and Erica had been in a different home game that I'd run, and they knew each other as players, but the 4 of them had never interacted as players outside of like a production meeting or 2, or like a session 0 and session -1 that I'll talk about in a second. So we all thought it would be a great idea to get to know each other through like a 3-shot of this like other adventure, playing the same characters that they now play in Transplanar RPG, but basically like an AU, right? Where like what they do like in this one shot, like the 3-shot doesn't actually matter or have any bearing on the actual main campaign. And like, but it basically allowed them a chance to get to know each other as players, right? And as characters to sort of like gauge what their dynamic could look like in the actual like canon campaign itself. So I took them through like a 2 or 3 shot of that like pre-gen adventure, and they got along very well, and I think it was very helpful for them to like soothe their nerves, because I think that was the first time streaming for all of us, just in general on Twitch, and especially like the first time streaming like an actual play game, right? So that was really good for our nerves. And before the 3-shot, we also obviously we had a session, what I call a session -1, which is essentially a production meeting where we like got together and we were like, what do we want to name this? First of all, Transplanar RPG was thrown out there by someone, I forget who, but we were like, that's great because we're all trans, and it feels fantasy like, right? So we were like, let's do it, Transplanar RPG. During the session -1, we also talked about like logistical things, like who's going to do the work, right? Like who's going to be hosting like the Twitch channel, and like who's going to be doing the art, for it, who's going to be doing publicity and managing the social media accounts, like stuff like that. And we like worked all of that out. Like during the session -1, like we set up a Slack, and like a Discord for ourselves, like to like coordinate amongst each other. And then we had a session 0 after I collected a lot of their thoughts during the session -1 and could basically like put together a campaign document from all the wishes and themes they were interested in exploring that had come up during the session -1. And then the session 0 was actual character creation. Each of them brought like 1 to 3 character concepts and pitched it to the rest of the group. And we were like, I feel like that character would fit really well with this character. So it's actually like, I think about this sometimes, like we could have had a completely different cast if that session 0 had gone any differently. But I'm really glad with the cast of characters we came up with that emerged from that session 0. We ended up with, Dewey, played by Max, Cardew Quirk, he, him, who is our artificer, Eric Kokra. We ended up with Oka Hie, played by C, Oka, they, them pronouns, our Osmar Blood Hunter. We ended up with V Noxerzo, played by Erica, our like high elf sorcerer. And finally, last but not least, we ended up with Manaya Waidura, she, her, played by Devin. And Manaya is our half-orc fighter, and later on, after the end of Arc 1, multi-classed into Warlock. So those are sort of the steps we took from a logistical and also developmental and narrative and like performance prep standpoint to make sure that the pilot episode could come out smoothly. And we also did a lot of publicity work. I run like a semi-successful Tumblr D&D blog, I would say, called D&Daddy Issues, and I did a lot of publicity on that. And I think that was why our numbers for our first episode were really encouraging, and how we were able to like take that momentum and keep going from that.
Okay, I love the concept of that 3-shot that you talked about, was just getting everybody comfortable together because,
yes,
yeah, like you look at the first episode and I would never have guessed that y'all hadn't known each other for years. Like everyone seems so comfortable. And yeah, like that's really cool. Especially, so you said that they played the same characters in that 3-shot?
Yes, they did. Okay. But the premise of the 3-shot was they were already an adventuring party and knew each other, which I think like helped adjust them to the pilot, because the premise of the pilot is none of them had ever met before, and they all were sort of like brought together by a particular event.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now that you are almost a year, like that's also just wild to me that it hasn't even been a year and you have so much out there already.
Thank you.
So now that you're almost a year into this, what is kind of your typical process for getting ready for each episode? And then after you're done recording, I know there's a little bit of editing that goes into, but kind of what does that process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. This past year, we are coming up on our 1-year anniversary, like from our like pilot launch, because that like end of June last year. So it's kind of crazy to think about. Like, you're totally right. It's been like 12 months. What? We have learned a lot, I think, about every aspect of like actual play streaming from like the narrative aspect, like becoming better performers, becoming better players in the sense of like knowing our characters better and like knowing how to advocate for ourselves in more like tangible ways. Like when we first started, we weren't using content warnings or like safety tools at all, because I didn't really realize that was a thing at the time. But after like getting more involved in the online, like Twitter tabletop community, like we sort of like sat down during one of our production meetings and we're like, why don't we have a list of everyone's lines and veils? So we sat down and made one, right? And like we started incorporating content warnings into into a triggerable chat command for every stream for like safety for our audience, because we often deal with really heavy themes and encounters that happen. It's a very like gory horror, emotionally heavy campaign, I would say. Even though I come from like a improv comedy background, but yeah, 2 sides of the same coin, right? We've also grown a lot in terms of production value, like upgrading our equipment. I started out with like a toner mic, which is fine, but if you listen to like the pilot episode, I'm clipping so much. Whenever I like shout, it gets like so high and it doesn't sound great. And I have been lucky enough to upgrade to a Shure SM7B, like on my end. I actually won it through a giveaway. like a random like Twitter giveaway. Like holy crap, like so lucky, right? And Erica, who plays Vinox Scherzo, she actually quit her full-time job to pursue Twitch streaming like full-time. Like soon after, like I think like around the time we started streaming Transplanar, she started her own like Twitch channel, Erica New Girl. It started as just like an art channel, but it has since expanded, and I'm honestly so proud of Erica. Like she's put in so much work, and I now have like learned a lot of things from her about streaming that I've applied to Transplanar RPG, like how to run OBS better, how to come up with like cooler overlays, like the importance of like building a community on Twitch and like interacting with other people's content, right? Not just like promoting yourself all the time, but actually like genuinely like forming connections with other people, like in like who are doing similar things to you, and like growing publicity wise, like growing our Twitter presence, our like other social media accounts. Like I could go on forever about about like this sort of thing, like these sort of like things I've learned from like a year of running Transplanar RPG. And, you know, I have grown so much like as a GM. The way I run things now for this specific table is so different from like episode 1 versus like now like arc 3, episode 2. Episode 3, right? Like I've changed the way I deal with combat and skill checks, almost like turned it upside down. Like after starting to play and run PBTA games, frankly, I've started like appearing as like a guest star and like a guest player on like other channels that don't do D&D, right? So that has been an amazing experience to like play with other amazing actual play performers and talent, and like learn about like how other folks do run their channels. Getting involved with other channels like on the back end as well, like supporting, like I will always plug Qtopia TV, like amazing like all BIMPOC channel for actual play and like tabletop content, you know, and just so many amazing folks out there like doing similar things to us. And I'm very excited that we will to sort of celebrate our 1-year anniversary. We've been teasing this for a couple weeks now, to release our backlog of past Twitch VODs as like an edited podcast. And yes, I will be editing it, but I won't have to like work with 6 different audio channels at once. It'll just be like the single like audio file, like taken from like our VODs, right? That we now like put on YouTube. So I'm really excited for that. I feel like that will, you know, help our stories reach like a new audience, right? Or like reach new folks who might, you know, who might be trans or questioning their gender, right? Or like just allies or like folks interested in stories told by like a diverse crew, like heavy stories about like trauma and destiny, right? And I'm excited because I know the podcast audience out there is like overlaps with, but you know, it's still a Venn diagram with like the Twitch streaming audience. So I'm very enthusiastic about that. So these are just like ways that we've grown and like ways that we're looking toward the future.
Okay, that was something that I was wondering, was if you were going to ever consider grabbing the audio and putting it out there in podcast form. So I'm really excited that you're going to do that. I'm one of those people that, yeah, like when it comes to actual plays, I prefer in podcast form just because it's easier to take around with me. So yes.
I mean, yeah.
Awesome.
Totally. It's a different beast for sure. I feel like the two often get grouped into the same category, like, oh, like calling all actual play like pods and streams, which is like fair, right? Because it's basically the same. We're doing the same thing, but just in 2 different mediums, right? But a podcast, I think, has different expectations. Like podcast listeners, modern podcast listeners, I would say, expect podcasts to like sound good. Like they, you know, ear fatigue is like a real problem that can happen if there's like a lot of like dissonant things going on in the background. Whereas I think like live stream viewers are a touch more forgiving in that regard, and there's more like a more visual component to it. And like folks also know like performance wise, like there will be, because you know it's not edited, it's live. Like there will be pauses, there will be you know, there will be like ruling decisions that a podcast might have like cut out, you know. So yeah, I'm excited to be able to offer a tighter, like more edited and crisp experience via the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. It does take a little more work though. So
yes, it
props
does.
to you.
It absolutely does.
So is there anything that has surprised you about streaming this campaign over the last year?
That is a really interesting question. I would say, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just how, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I still am, just how many other people are doing it. Right? Like we did a little bit of like market research, I guess, before we started streaming. Like we were like, let's see what other people who are streaming tabletop actual plays are doing, right? And I was blown away by how many channels there were streaming D&D, streaming like tabletop RPGs, and like I was like, wow, like these overlays, like they're animated, you know, and like they've got incentives. Like I never even thought about that, right, before like looking at, you know, so that was really surprising to me, just like how much of an industry I guess it is. Not an industry in the sense of like, I guess like film or TV, like Hollywood bringing in like millions of dollars, like millions and millions of dollars a year, but it's like a thing, you know. It feels like a hobby, like a specific like hobby, like tabletop actual play live streams on Twitch with a specific like kind of audience that seeks that out, versus like actual play podcasts or more broadly speaking like podcast audiences. So that was surprising. Another surprising thing to me, and this is really embarrassing to admit, but for the longest time I thought D&D was like the only thing out there. Like I didn't know other tabletop games existed. Like I thought Pathfinder was just like a D&D ripoff or something. Like I didn't even know what Pathfinder was. Like the name was familiar to me, but I wasn't sure what it was. And it wasn't until like, you know, like toward the end of college, like when I was really like starting to grow, I think into my GMing, like that I realized like, oh my God. Also like the McElroy, you know, brothers, they were playing Monster of the Week as for like one of their like next campaigns. And I was like, that sounds like a really fun game. And so like dipping my toe into trying like other games that aren't D&D, like indie games too as well. And like realizing that there is such a robust like tabletop roleplay game designing community on Twitter specifically, right? Like that was very surprising to me. And I was very excited to get involved in that online community, communities, I guess, because there's no like one. Like I do have like complicated feelings about the term community. But yeah, that was surprising to me. And just like, I don't know, like the sheer amount of content there is out there, like maps and modules, right? And like people's like people who like make dice and people who make candles and minis, you know, like not, you know, as like for their hobby or like for a living, like people who like sell like tabletop overlays, right? And design them, you know, like all of that was very, very cool for me to like dip my toe into for the first time. And I realized like all of this is coming from a place of ignorance, because like this has been around for the longest time. Like I'm not trying to say like this just, you know, like I discovered it or anything like that, like at all, like very like Columbus colonizer-esque. But no, I was very surprised and excited to find like a booming, blooming, beautiful community doing exactly the kind of thing I wanted to do.
Yeah. Like you're not alone in that just aspect of going in and being like, oh, this is a hobby that I enjoy. And I'd say, yeah, for us, it's been since kind of mid 2019 is when we started thinking about doing some things to get into this industry, and then realized like, oh my gosh, there are so many people doing so many things that I've never even heard of or thought of. And it's really cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think that, you know, if there's a time where the current arcs and the current characters that you're playing kind of winds down, would you possibly switch over to streaming a different game?
That is actually a really great question, because we recently, I would say in the past maybe 2 or 3 months, the past 3 months, we switched over to just streaming our main D&D campaign every Saturday. We started out actually as a bi-weekly campaign, and then to hit affiliate, we added other programming. Like we had I did like a series called like Professor Chang's Tabletop Workshop, where I like gave GMing tips and like talked about like my experience building non-colonial anti-orientalist worlds and like what that means, you know, for other people interested in that sort of work and that sort of world building. We had like C did like an art streams, like Devin and Max played video games, and so did I. Like we had like a bunch of auxiliary streams that we started for the purpose of hitting affiliate, but then like they just sort of like stayed around, like probably for like August until like December or even like January. We just had these auxiliary streams. So we were streaming 2, 3, 4 times a week at our peak, not just our main campaign. And we were like having production meetings every week as well. Like every Wednesday we had like 2 to 3 hour long production meetings, like sitting down, right? So like we did like a New Year's envisioning like vision board thing where we like got together and we were like, y'all, like we're stretching ourselves way too thin. We love a lot of these like auxiliary streams we're doing. And one of them was like, we call them one-shot wonders, where we would play a different tabletop RPG game that wasn't D&D, and like we came up with completely new characters, and we like played one-shots, right? And we were like focusing on like one-page RPGs by people of color and queer folks, RPGs that were GM-less or diceless, or like easy to pick up and learn and stuff like that. We like did several of those streams. They were a lot of fun, but again, like we were stretching ourselves way too thin. And So we had like that vision board meeting, and we refocused our energies and cut out all of these auxiliary streams just to focus on our weekly D&D stream. So to more directly answer your question, I do think that once our main campaign wraps, once we're done like with this story, with this campaign, that would have to be a conversation that I have with my cast, right? Like, I think there is desire and interest from all of us to try a new system, maybe set in like the same setting or like the same universe of settings, right? But with like a completely new cast, completely new characters, and a completely new system, I think is something that we've all expressed interest in.
Fair enough. So another question that I have is, if someone has never streamed on Twitch before and doesn't really understand how all of that works, and then they see that, you know, Connie is the executive producer of this actual play, what would you say that encompasses? Like, so you're obviously the game master and you're doing so much work getting the story and the campaign together. But when it comes to the actual streaming part, like, what is your role?
So this is sort of how I pitched the involvement on Transplanar RPG to the other players. When I first reached out to see Erica, Max, and Devin, I told them explicitly, all I'm expecting you to do is show up with your characters and play. That's it. You don't have to do anything else that you don't want to do. And any extra work that they've done, like C is our character artist, right? Like Devin and Max like streamed those auxiliary streams, right? And like Devin like sometimes runs our Instagram, and like Max will like sometimes do like behind the scenes like work, and like both Max and Devin will like work, like help run our Discord, right? And like Erica will like always be plugging Transplanar on her own channel, etc. But like all of those things, all of that labor, I guess is one way to put it, was stuff that they willingly took on, and that I said like was not required of them at all, right? They were just players, and that's all they needed to do. So how I would explain my job to someone who is new to this is, my players play and I do everything else, right? Like I GM, right? But I, as a producer, I run the stream. So like I'm running OBS, right? On my end, like I do the tech, like I like put up the, I manage our Twitch page. I manage all of our like social media pages. Basically, I run our Tumblr, our Twitter, our Instagram. I upload the VODs to YouTube when they're done. I edit the VODs first, and I render them, and then I upload them to YouTube. So they're a little edited. And I do, I'm now editing like past podcast episodes, as that's like another thing I do. And I used to like run almost all of the streams for our auxiliary streams too. But then like Devin started running them as well after I gave them like our Twitch login, but that doesn't really apply anymore. And I would say like other things too, like I'm in the process of setting up a Patreon for us, maybe still eyeing the numbers on that. But that is in our horizon. Like just doing a lot of it is doing stuff on Twitter, because I feel like that's where so much of the stuff is, like so much of the publicity lives is on Twitter, right? Like for tabletop stuff. And yeah, I'm trying to think of like what else I do. I mean, I've got stuff outside of Transplanar, like game design stuff and like running games for like Magpie and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say like in a nutshell, those are my duties and responsibilities as the producer.
That's just a little bit.
Just a bit of stuff.
Well, cool. That is a lot of work, but it's so obvious that you are so passionate about this and you just love it so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I really don't want this to come off as like I do all the work, because again, like my players also do a lot. Like Devin and Max are so active in the Discord. Like I'm really not as active as I should be. Like my partner C does all of our art, which is amazing. And they also like run our merch store, that like they'll put new designs up on our merch store, which is also great. Like we all try to like play to our own strengths and interests, like as a team. But yeah, we try to like play to our strengths, and only like take on the kind of work that we, one, feel enthusiastic about taking on, and two, feel able to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. From everything that I've seen from the whole group, it just seems that everyone loves what you're doing, and it's fun. It's really special.
Oh, thank you.
I do want to switch gears a little bit and see how much you're willing to tell me about Godkiller RPG.
Oh wow, you've done your research. Yeah, I am willing to talk so much about it. So Godkiller RPG is a holy punk PBTA hack that I'm writing. That is a PBTA game for one player the Godkiller, and one GM, God. And I describe it as like Mad Max Fury Road, right? Meets the Raven Tower by like Anne Leckie. So like very like a radiated divinity, right? Like post-apocalyptic wasteland where gods eat each other for like power, survival, and pleasure. And I am very excited about Godkiller RPG.
How long have you been working on that?
Oh my god, that is a question. The seed for Godkiller RPG started like last year, like probably like last summer or something, like maybe like August or September. I have such a slippery grasp on time. It's my ADHD. But I started like putting out information about it maybe like beginning of this year, I want to say. I can do my research on this on my own work like very quickly right now. I had a playtest ready version for it that, in February of this year, that I put out. I ran a session, a one-shot session of Godkiller RPG for my partner. I was the GM, they were the Godkiller, on Friends Who Roll Dice's like charity stream that they had, I think in March, actually. On March 18th. And that was a lot of fun. We sort of got to like test out some of these like mechanics I'd been like working on, and it was good. It was a great learning experience, I think, for both of us to see like what worked, like what still needed like a little bit more polishing, etc. And yeah, I really hope to have like a quick start guide out by like end of the summer, probably, like knowing my own writing schedule.
Where do you think that you'll publish that?
I am thinking of putting it on itch. That is where all of my like modules and games and mini games will live. It's same as my Twitter, by Connie Chang on itch, by BY, as in the authorial sign off, not the sexuality, though I am both. And I have also been juggling around the idea of launching a personal Patreon where like all of my games, everything that I make on itch will be available to my patrons like for free. And they'll also like get early access and stuff like that. But that is very much like in the developmental stage right now, very much in the works.
It sounds like a really, really cool concept.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say like the central theme or question I'm trying to explore in Godkiller is like what makes a tragic hero, right? I'm very inspired by like Greek like tragedies, basically like Heracles or Hercules, I guess, the Roman way. Everyone knows who Heracles is, but like he was driven mad by Hera. After he'd like completed his 12 labors, after he was like at the pinnacle of his heroism, and he was driven mad and he killed his own family, like his children and his wife, with his bare hands, right? And then like when he woke from that, he fell into like a depressive, like suicidal, like stupor, right? This amazing hero that caused a jealous goddess to strike him down to show him his place, right? And like other like heroes, like specifically in classical mythology, because I am a reformed classics nerd, is what I would say. Like having taken like 6 years of Latin in high school, and like being a part of like the Latin club like in high school, like all of those experiences have shaped what I'm putting into Godkiller RPG now. Like it's very much like a grim, dark fantasy, game that questions the role of the GM as well, like as God, and like the GM being the last god that the Godkiller will kill, and like building that into the mechanics is a very fun challenge for me.
Side note, I was also a Latin nerd for about 4 years. So amazing.
That's awesome.
Gonna make me even more excited for this game. Just knowing that that's kind of what's some of the inspiration anyway.
Oh, heck yeah. Like 100%.
That's so cool. Okay. So I want to make sure that I get this question in. So terrible segue, but whatever. This is a question that I ask in every interview.
Okay.
But just kind of looking back over the last year of just this game development, even with Godkiller RPG, but also with getting everything together with Twitch and Transplanar and learning all of that. What would you say has been the most challenging part?
Knowing when to say no. Like knowing when to say no to stuff. Knowing how to advocate for myself and set boundaries about like what I can and can't do. Because like Transplanar RPG in a lot of regards is like my baby, right? It's like my passion project, right? That has evolved into something that I'm like, damn, like could this actually be like something, right? Like not just sort of like, I don't want to say not just a hobby, because that sounds like I'm looking down on people who play RPGs as hobbies, like, but when that is explicitly not what I'm trying to say. But this could be a viable way that I spend the majority of my time, right? And that feels really exciting. and like just knowing how to spend my time, I think has been the most challenging thing. Like for me personally, how much time do I dedicate to game design? How much time do I dedicate to prepping my campaign for Transplanar and run, and like how much time do I pour into Transplanar? How much time do I spend like GMing for Magpie games, right? Like how much time do I spend guest starring on other people's projects and other people's channels? Like how much time do I spend doing my like day job, right? Like, cause I actually like, I work for a company too, to like pay the bills, right? How much time, how do I split myself 5 ways and still have time to rest? Like that has definitely been the most challenging part of all of this, because I'm doing like a million things. Like people are always telling me like, Connie, you always seem crazy busy. Like I feel like I don't even want to like bother you with a Discord DM because I feel like you are so busy that you'll just never answer or like whatever. And I like keeping busy, like, I like it, but I don't want to come off that way either, right? Like, I don't want to come off as like this unapproachable person. And I very much believe, like, this is going to sound so like whatever, but I very much believe that the energy you put out, like the wishes, and dreams that you put out to the universe will come back to you in some way. Like if I say out loud, like I invite success, into my life, like I invite like all these blessings into my life, like in every aspect of my life, like tabletop or otherwise, like, and I put in the work, like the universe will come, like the universe, the energy will come back to me. And I don't want to put out the energy of like, I'm too busy and then like miss out on opportunities. Right. So like, it's definitely knowing how to toe that line, how to both like take care of myself and like avoid burnout, but also to like keep myself open to like blessings that I could be missing out on otherwise. And I say this, I want to be clear, as like a non-religious person. Like this isn't like, I'm not, just to clarify that I'm not Christian or anything like that, though if you are, this isn't knocking on you.
No, I think that is a really important point, especially in this industry. There are so many content creators that are just always saying yes because they want to get themselves out there. They want to, they want to build their audience, which is good and necessary, but it's so hard to know how much is too much. And you never want to fall into the point where you've just completely burnt yourself out and that your body starts actually taking it out on you.
100%.
Yeah. Well, to flip it around, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of this journey?
Oh my God, the community. Like hands up, that was so much easier to answer. Like the meeting people, meeting these amazing like other like GMs and players and like game designers and tabletop game producers. Wow. I am so grateful to everyone, like every single person who has showed me the ropes in some way. I don't want to like name names because I don't want to like put them out there right necessarily, but y'all know who you are, like for real. Like if we've ever interacted on like a one-on-one level, or if we've ever played in a game together, or like you've ever come on Transplanar, or like I've come onto your like anyway, like I owe a debt of gratitude to you to like welcoming me into your space. Right. Like if we're like Twitter mutuals and we've like exchanged like, back and forth, like even that, like I am so grateful to that. Like the people here are amazing. And I feel really, really, really lucky that my positive experiences far outweigh my negative experiences, like in terms of like doing tabletop stuff. Like even as like a trans group, like we've definitely faced our fair share of transphobic trolls like on our Twitch, and like troll comments or whatever, like on our YouTube, etc. But like the outpouring of support that we've gotten has like so much like outweighed that. To that, I am like so grateful.
Yeah, there have been so many amazing connections that I've made, and yeah, it's a really fun community. Like there's definitely some problems out there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, 100%.
Definitely not going to say that there aren't, but I don't think that I would be where I am today. And I know many other people feel the same, that just without the support that's out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of my experience is also due to how I've very intentionally and meticulously curated my spaces, like one shitty comment block. Like not even on my thread, like, but I'll block, like, and I will block, block on Twitter, and like Discord, like someone says something in a Discord that I'm like, I leave, like I am very, very intentional about the like energy I try to be, at least, like that I invite into my space and that I like put out. But of course I'm an Aries, so sometimes my like top blows off and I like do something like dumb or like irrational or like I lash out. But other, outside of like those, I would say like pretty like one-off instances, like I try to do my best to like make sure that my spaces are as curated as possible to make as positive an experience as I can get as like a queer, like Chinese person on the internet.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Well, I know that we've talked about a few things, kind of talked about some future plans, but just in case, are there any upcoming projects that we haven't talked about that you are excited about and able to share?
Yes. Just so I know how far in the future I should talk about things, when do you anticipate this is going to come out?
Actually, this is meant to schedule for this week.
Oh, great.
So
if it comes out in time, like Wednesday and Thursday,
it would be Friday.
Probably not. Okay, no worries. Then maybe I could talk about it in the past tense on this podcast, because I still want to talk about it, even though it will have already happened, which is such a fun use of like the future subjunctive. Who knows? I don't know. I am, as of the recording of this, organizing a really, really, really amazing event with so many, and I say amazing because like the panelists, the folks involved, called Roll for Solidarity, uplifting Asian and Black creatives in TTRPGs. It is a 2-day charity event spanning Wednesday, May 19th and Thursday, May 20th. There will be 6 discussion panels spread across these 2 days, so 3 panels per day. And the panels are spread across from 4 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. U.S. Central Time both days. And there are so many amazing panelists involved, in panel mods, Twitch chat mods, and Twitch co-hosts involved in this project. Like everyone involved is a person of color, like Black or AAPI, and all the proceeds that we're trying to raise through Roll for Solidarity are going to be split evenly between the Tamir E. Rice Foundation, which is the nonprofit started by Tamir Rice's mother, where money toward that would support like after school programming for underserved Black and brown youth, as well as advocating for police reform in Cleveland, Ohio. And the other 50% of all donations will go toward Affirm Hawaii's emergency relief fund for Hawaii sex workers and survivors. Both causes which are very near and dear to my heart personally, and I know very near and dear to the hearts of many, if not all, of the panelists who are involved in this. And the purpose of Roll for Solidarity, as you might have been able to glean from the name, is to share our joy as creators of color in this space and to support each other and affirm each other's truths and center happiness, right? And like, because I feel like so much of the time, like we're centering our pain and our trauma, right? Like on in online spaces, and we are very intentionally trying to focus on like happiness and joy and like radical joy, but also like not shying away from like hard and difficult conversations, right? And like being like authentic to our own lived experiences of what it's been like to be like Black or Asian or Pacific Islander or Hawaiian in tabletop roleplay games. So yeah, that is an event that has, if you're listening to this, already happened. But to get a list of all the panelists who are involved and follow them all, because they're all amazing, go to Transplanar RPG on Twitter, and it should be in one of our most recent like tweets. Like we definitely like will have tweeted about this in the future and have thanked everyone involved. So just check our Twitter page. That's the best way to check. And yeah, that's the most recent one. I can hit pause there if you had any like thoughts about it, like before I go on to like launch, like go into a eulogy about something else.
Yeah. So since by the time this comes out, the event will have already happened. Do you know if there is a place where people can go back and watch what they missed?
Oh, that is a great, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Courtney. 100%. VODs will be live on Transplanar RPG's Twitch in the video section for like a week after it's aired. And then we will be putting them on our YouTube. So youtube.com/C as in the letter, /Transplanar RPG. We'll be putting all of the panels like on our YouTube for posterity.
Okay, awesome. All right, what else you got?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier in this interview, I'm very, very, very excited for Transplanar RPG to be, I'm pretty sure we're going to be launching a Patreon probably by the end of June to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. If not Transplanar RPG, then at least probably my own personal Patreon if you wanted to support my work. I'm excited to be launching that probably like end of June or like sometime in this summer, where you can get early access to like all my games, including Godkiller RPG, all my modules, like my modules for like running like accelerated combat in D&D, like my mini games, like including like role play, which is a relationship system agnostic relationship building mini game. If your players struggle with like role playing, or if they want more role playing in their games and you want some sort of structure to help guide them, as well as I'll be, I've also got like tons of other like one page RPGs cooking in the works too. But outside of a game design perspective, like I'll also be like offering like my GMing services on my Patreon for certain like patrons of like a certain tier, as well as like one-on-one time for us to like workshop about your own, like, if you wanted like GMing tips or wanted to like troubleshoot things happening in your home games, etc. I wanted to talk through those things with a professional GM and someone who can offer a variety of perspectives, as well as like patrons will get early access to all of my like articles and like manifestos, think pieces, blog posts, essays, etc. about like building non-colonial anti-orientalist worlds, building more diverse and inclusive tables, as well as like general GMing tips like running and prepping like complex villains, cinematic combat. Like if you're interested in like how I organize my arcs in like a narratively satisfying way, like those things too, like how to keep players engaged at the table, like how to set the mood, stuff like that. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, follow me on Twitter and keep your eyes posted for a Patreon announcement.
Those all sound like absolutely amazing resources. That is so exciting.
Yes, I'm excited to release it out into the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll definitely keep an eye out and help spread the word once those are up and ready.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney. I know we're just about reaching our hour mark, but did you have any other questions or any other things you wanted to talk about?
Really, just at this point, we are kind of winding down. So where all can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter and Itch at by Connie Chang. That is ByConniechang. Twitter and Itch. You can also find Transplanar RPG on Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, YouTube, Instagram, basically everywhere, at Transplanar RPG. That is TRANS as in trans. And then planar is spelled PLANAR as in like the planes of the universe, and then RPG, the 3 letters.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll have all of those links down in the show notes. But Connie, thank you so much for coming on today. This was really fun.
Awesome. Yeah, this was thank you for just listening to me like talk for like an hour straight. This was great. Thank you for inviting me on, Courtney.
That's it for today's episode of Role Play Grow. To check out the show notes, you can go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. To keep up with every episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave me a review. Reviews are one of the best ways to help a newer podcast get up off the ground. To follow me on Twitter, you can either find me at LightheartADV for our business account, or at Ketra, WCR, to see me tweet about other things like my dog and World of Warcraft. You can also find us as Lightheart Adventures on both Instagram and Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week on Role Play Grow.